Welcome to your favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Heather.
And today we will be discussing and reviewing Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. As usual, let's talk about our fuel for this discussion. What are you drinking over there, Heather?
I have my usual white chocolate mocha with oat milk from Starbucks. Always comes in clutch.
Delicious.
Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
I threw it back this weekend because Eric wanted Dunkin'. It was for his birthday. You know, I've been staying away from my Dunkin' because they haven't been delivering. But you just have to give it a little break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because then we went back. I got my butter pecan. Perfect, immaculate, amazing. I was like, why don't I have this every day? So they redeemed themselves, but I'm still going to wait a little while before I go back just to make sure.
You don't want to get your hopes up.
Exactly. I don't want them to ruin this for me, this high that I'm riding. Anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so Karin Slaughter lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and believe it or not, her name is not a pen name.
Wow.
I was shocked by this. I just assumed that it was, but I was looking into it and it's not. And with how her talents have really aligned, this is baffling news. So she just got lucky.
I was going to say she realized what her last name was and just took it and ran with it.
She was like, I either need to be a serial killer or write about serial killers. Or both. We don't know. Anyway, allegedly, I would never say such a thing about my idol. Okay, anyway, she's the author of more than 20 instant New York Times bestselling novels. She's published in 120 countries with more than 40 million copies sold across the globe. She has a Netflix series based on pieces of her, an ABC series based on her character Will Trent, and The Good Daughter and False Witness are both in development for screen adaptations. So she is killing it, to be...
She's slaughtering it.
I love that. Thank you. We needed that. She is slaughtering it. You're right.
Just came to me. Sometimes I get these gems that just pop out at the most perfect moments. And I'm like,
it passed up a good opportunity. And we need as much lightheartedness as we can get in this episode. So bear with us. So she's also the founder of the Save the Libraries Project, which is a nonprofit organization established to support public libraries and to shift the narrative to thinking of libraries as luxuries to acknowledging that they are actually necessities to their communities. To date, the organization has raised $300,000 for the DeKalb County Library in Atlanta. So, as if I couldn't love her anymore, she's out here fighting for our libraries.
I'd love to see it.
Right? It's awesome. All right, so on her website, she has a frequently asked questions section, and one of the questions is, why is there so much violence in your books? And this is how she answers. I want to show violence for what it is. For so long, women weren't expected to talk about these crimes, even though we were more likely to be the victims. I think it's time we started talking about rape and violence against women. When I was growing up, these subjects were boys-only territory in fiction, so I find it refreshing to see other authors really opening up the conversation about abuse and sexual assault. That isn't to say that men are not capable of writing about these topics, only that women authors bring a different perspective. Could not agree with this more. The reality of the situation is that no matter how fictional her books are, violence against women is a real and tangible thing.
It is.
And it needs to be spoken about.
Yeah, 100%.
So this book, Pretty Girls, was originally published in July 2015. And I'll just list the awards quickly. Instant New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal Best Book of 2015, Huffington Post Best Books of 2015, Good Housekeeping's Best New Read, Redbook Best Book 2015, Amazon Best Book of October 2015, a #1 iBooks bestseller, Costco Buyer's Staff Pick, People's Choice Award winner, ITW Thriller Award finalist for Best Hardcover Novel, and last but not least, Goodreads finalist for Best Mystery and Thriller in 2015.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So I first read this in June 2022. And even though I was reading a few books a month, nothing like I do now, but this book really lit a fire under me to start diving into reading again. So it does have that significance for me, and obviously that's why I picked it. I was nervous that it wouldn't hold up on the reread, so let's dive in and see if it did.
Sounds good.
All right, so here's our book summary. More than 20 years ago, Claire and Lydia's teenage sister Julia vanished without a trace. The two women have not spoken since, and now their lives could not be more different. Claire is the glamorous trophy wife of an Atlanta millionaire. Lydia, a single mother, dates an ex-con and struggles to make ends meet. But neither has recovered from the horror and heartbreak of their shared loss, a devastating wound that's cruelly ripped open when Claire's husband is killed. The disappearance of a teenage girl and the murder of a middle-aged man almost a quarter-century apart. What could connect them? Forming a wary truce, the surviving sisters look to the past to find the truth, unearthing the secrets that destroyed their family all those years ago, and uncovering the possibility of redemption and revenge where they least expect it.
I feel like this summary, and it sets you up, but I like it too because it gives nothing away.
It's so
don't
true.
expect what happens in this book at all. And
because there's no way to even hint at it.
No.
Because if you even hint at the husband having to do with anything, you're already breaking the first big bombshell.
Mm-hmm.
So I like it too. It's enough to pull you in, but doesn't give anything away.
I know, because I remember as I was reading it, at one point I just went back just to look at what like the summary was, and it was like a pleasant surprise because I was like, oh, I really don't know what's going on, you know?
Yeah, and sometimes the summaries give away the entire book.
They do. They absolutely do, which I don't love. Because like I want to know like a little bit about what I'm reading about, and typically I typically don't ever read the full summary of books when I dive into them because I don't like to be like completely spoiled. Obviously, I do it more now with doing the podcast and everything, but I don't want to know everything. I just want to know a little bit.
All right, so let's get into it. Claire and Lydia's sister Julia was 19 when she went missing, and it ripped their family apart, understandably. And the story switches back and forth between Claire and Lydia's POVs. So we start with Claire and Paul. Claire was put on house arrest with an ankle monitor. We'll get to that later. But for her first night off, they decide to go to a bar. And as they're leaving, Paul uncharacteristically pulls her into the alley to bang. And then someone comes up on them, robs them, seems like he's going to kidnap Claire, but Paul goes to defend her and he gets stabbed to death, which is quite the way to start this book.
It really was.
And we're led to believe that Paul is the perfect doting husband, completely devoted to Claire, basically nerdy and vanilla. That's what I got from it.
I did too, especially with the way that the author talks about him in those first few chapters. I really thought the same thing. I was like, oh, this is like a little nerdy, like finance guy who just loves his wife so much.
And just like happy to be with Claire, just like the luckiest man alive. So after his death, someone breaks into their house, and for some reason, the FBI is there to investigate. We find out that the FBI already knows about Paul because skeezy agent Nolan tells Claire that Paul embezzled $3 million from his company and his partner, who is also his best friend, Adam Quinn, sketchiness to be determined, and Adam called the FBI instead of going directly to Paul.
Yeah. He
so
was
that's
so
why they
like
were
upset
involved.
about the embezzlement that instead of, which like surprised me that that was like his first thing to do because him and Paul have been friends for so long. So,
and it also immediately, it sounds like this big bombshell, but it's not because the FBI agents are like $3 million to Paul is basically like $5 to us. Like he's worth almost $100 million or something. I don't know. They say
no,
the
he's
amount.
worth a lot of money. Yeah. So
yeah.
I think they even said that, like you said in the book, like $3 million to him is nothing. So why would he take such a small amount?
Mm-hmm. So that's why the FBI is kind of like still digging around, even though the charges have been dropped and I guess the $3 million was paid back. But there's still something going on there. And Adam very insensitively asked Claire to email over some files for their work presentation. But good thing he does, because Claire logs onto Paul's computer and finds a very questionable series of videos. They are videos showing the extensive torture and ultimate murder of a young girl. Not young like young, but young like a barely legal teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Claire doesn't know if this is fake porn or an actual snuff film, but either way, she's completely rattled because she didn't know Paul was into any of that. He's very vanilla, as we said. And she does go to the police, but they convince her the video is fake. And immediately, you know, the cops are not to be trusted because he casually, but not casually, asks if there are any other copies of these videos.
Mm-hmm.
So already you're like, there's so many characters in here that are sketchy. And we're in like the first chapter.
That was the thing. And every time like something would happen, I would have concerns about a character, and then I realized it was like, oh, like a red herring in a sense. But I was like, you never know with any of them.
Mm-hmm. And I was so invested that I was like, oh my God, who do we trust? Who do we trust? Like, I'm in this story. So switch to Lydia's POV. She has a daughter named Dee and her partner named Rick. And Lydia finds out that Paul died, and she is ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
Which at first you're like, the sisters are estranged. Why does she care? Why is she so affected by this news? But we learn that she accused him of rape when he first started dating Claire. But Claire and their mom didn't believe Lydia because she was using drugs, she was stealing, she was lying at the time. So she didn't really have too much credibility in their eyes. And Paul seemed like the perfect boyfriend. So Lydia goes to pay her respects to Paul by peeing on his grave.
Love that.
And Claire catches Lydia in the act at the grave after 18 years of not seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Needless to say, it's awkward, but Lydia gets the sense that Claire might be starting to doubt Paul.
Mm-hmm.
But then they just go back their separate ways. So we go back to Claire digging into Paul's things. He'd been secretly keeping tabs on Lydia, paying a private investigator to follow her once a year and provide updates, and Claire had no idea. He was also paying for her daughter's schooling anonymously.
That was interesting to me.
I thought so too.
And it was also like never talked about again. It was like a little thing, but then I was kind of like interested as to why he was doing that in the first place.
Yeah, like I understood the following part, but why was he paying for her school?
Mm-hmm.
That part was kind of weird. I don't know if it was just like so that he knew in his mind that he had something over her.
That's a good point.
Because he just loved that control, even if she didn't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also files on several other women. And Claire starts to panic. Because what if what Lydia was saying is true? And what if Paul raped all of these other women too? So Claire calls Lydia, and obviously they become the dynamic duo to get to the bottom of things, even though Claire is on parole and can't be with a convicted felon, which Lydia is. And Lydia is sober, a recovering addict, and has a daughter, and it's just not great. But we have to take 1 second to talk about one of my favorite parts of this book.
Okay.
Which is the fact that Claire pulled a Tanya Harding and laid some stuffy tennis bitch out with a tennis racket.
Yeah.
Because she was victim blaming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so out of character for Claire as we know her, but also so amazing.
Mm-hmm. It really, really is.
I just love that this weird little anecdote was thrown in there. And it's not just like thrown in there, it's referred to several times. And they keep talking about like when Claire kneecapped that woman.
It's great. It really is.
Like, I know it's violent, but it's also lighthearted compared to everything else in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they find out that Paul had a secret life. He still owned his parents' childhood home, even though Claire believed he had lost everything when his parents died and that the house had been torn down. But they go to the house and it's all boarded up. But once they break in, they can see that it's been cleaned recently. So they're kind of looking around, trying to figure out what's going on. At first, they thought that Paul had like a separate family with
Mm-hmm.
a secret wife and all of this stuff. But then they make their way to the garage and immediately they see blood, chains, weapons, and it is the set from the videos that Claire saw on the computer. And there's also an entire wall of shelves with
Mm-hmm.
VHS tapes dated all the way back to the 80s. And they find March 4th, 1991, and immediately they know their sister Julia is going to be on that tape.
Yeah.
And Claire suspects that Paul knew all along who she was and targeted her and wooed her because of Julia so he could see her pain in person. I did think it was a little crazy that they just immediately knew
Yeah.
what they were going to find.
I agree with that. That was a little too far-fetched for me. That
Yeah.
Because how would you know? Like, I understand, like, your sister did go missing, but there was really no justification as to why they immediately jumped to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm. It was quite a leap, even though at this point it's like Paul could literally be doing anything. Like she realizes that she didn't know him at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's also like Lydia has been so obsessed with disappearances of young women ever since her sister went missing. And so in her head, they're all connected.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like a gut feeling that unfortunately happened to be right. But yeah, I thought it was like a little weird. So after they watch the video and decide they're going to call the damn president himself to look into it, guess who shows up back from the dead? Paul!
This threw me. I wasn't expecting this. I really, really wasn't. But I knew that he was shady, and I almost like wondered it at some points, but I was like, no. I'm like, how would he fake his, like, that was a full on, like, I didn't know how he would do that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically stage a robbery and then get killed and everything. And she was like, I saw him die and everything. So it's like,
she talks about feeling him go cold in her arms. Did not see this coming at all. Paul has kidnapped Lydia, and Claire is left to try and unravel what the hell is going on. So she realizes the cop that was investigating Julia's disappearance knew all along that she was dead because they found their dad watching the video as he killed himself.
Yeah.
And he turned it over to the FBI. They pinned it on someone else, and that guy died in prison. But the guy who was in the FBI is now a politician who happened to be related to Paul and was always giving him government contracts, using him to funnel money through. Obviously, already sketchy shit. But on top of that, he's in on this torture porn operation, which, let's not forget, also includes kidnap, rape, and murder. And all along, Claire's really trying to figure out Paul's role in all of this because she's convinced he isn't the one in the videos doing the torture.
I know. I feel like she's like that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme, Charlie, where he's like in front of like a wall with all the red strings and he's like freaking out. And I'm like, that has to be Claire right now because there's just
1,000%.
There's so many moving pieces. And I was actually so nervous because there were so many moving pieces. I was like, how is this going to get like, how is this going to get resolved? And actually it was perfect, but there was just so many things. And every time Claire learned something, she would think she knew what was going on, and then something else would happen. And she's like, oh, fuck, I don't know what's going on at all. Like, there was just constantly new information being thrown at her that was mind-blowing.
And it's like she thought that Adam was sketchy. Turned out he wasn't. She thought that Agent Nolan was in on it, but turns out he wasn't. And just like, I thought it was gonna be too overwhelming, but it really did flow.
It did.
So Claire finds unedited videos that show that on the newer videos, Paul is the masked man. And before, in a post-production, he was editing out his birthmarks. He was slightly changing his skin color, his lip color, stuff like that. So he swears to her that he's still trying to manipulate her and say that everything he's doing is for her safety. And he was just a distributor. He would never participate in this, et cetera, et cetera. But he's a filthy fucking liar.
He's such a masochist and he's such a sociopath. Like, he's just gaslighting her over and over, and she keeps like falling for it. But I can't even blame her because he's been gaslighting her for what, 20 years? You know what I mean? So you can't fault her for believing everything he says. She wouldn't know to think differently.
Exactly. And she's also very aware of the fact of how freaking smart and how prepared Paul is. So she knows, like you said, when she's got the strings on the board, it's like she knows that he's 100 steps ahead of her. And she keeps saying like, oh, wait, but like Paul would have taken care of this for me. And like Paul would know what to do in this situation. And I never had to do this stuff because Paul was always taking care of it. Like, that is the relationship that they had cultivated out over all those years. So it feels like she can't do anything by herself. And she's completely helpless, especially against Paul. So Claire goes to Lydia's house to get her gun, which is buried under her back porch. And she runs into Rick. And at first, it was just very cringy the way she's lying to him. She says that Lydia started using again.
Yeah.
And it just like broke my heart and I hated it. But then, I mean, Rick sees through it. And he's not willing to give up that easily. He's like, Lydia hates you. Why should I trust you? Lydia said that you're a real good liar. And Claire's like, usually I am, but apparently I'm not. And so basically it just ends with her trying to convince him to take Lydia's daughter Dee and run far, far away. And I think it's a terrible plan. Rick would not have given up that easily, but I guess I can see it because of Dee.
Yeah.
That he was kind of like, I'll make sure Dee is safe and then I'll figure out what's going on. But obviously, Claire couldn't tell the truth. No one would believe her if she did. So, meanwhile, Paul is torturing Lydia. And I'll say, yes, this book is about torture porn. And that part is graphic. I didn't think it was too much. I mean, I'm obviously desensitized to this, but
yeah,
the torture with Lydia.
Yeah. That was hard.
We're not going to discuss it because it was enough that it made me very uncomfortable. And that's hard to do.
Yeah. It was a lot. And again, I'll say it again. Like, he's just such a masochist. Like, it's, oh my God. Pure evil is this man.
And it's like, this is who Lydia knew he was all along. Ugh, it's just so disgusting and heartbreaking. And the whole time, Lydia's like, Claire is never going to save me.
I know.
Like, she has no faith in Claire, which, like, to be fair, Claire doesn't have faith in herself.
No, and I kind of loved that there was, like, this dynamic between the two of them where Lydia's like, I know she's not going to save me. Like, I know that this is it, you know, and everything.
She's like, well, I better say goodbye now because, oh my gosh. So those were definitely some of the hardest chapters to read because it does go back and forth multiple times. It's not a quick scene and it's over. They revisit it. So now all along in between the chapters, there are excerpts from their dad's journal, which is in the form of letters that are basically to missing Julia. So he's updating her on his obsession with the case, what has happened since, etc. And he found out that Paul's dad was a fucking creep. So he worked on the college campus where she was going to college. And he was on the suspect list because he was a known peeping Tom. But he was cleared as a suspect. And as these letters go on, they're inserted in to kind of coincide with what's going on in the present day and what's the latest revelation. So Claire realized Paul's dad was involved. And then we get the letter when Claire's dad talks about never taking his own life because he wouldn't leave his remaining daughters, and how he wanted to get Paul alone to interrogate him.
Mm-hmm.
And after we get that letter, we flash back to Paul and Lydia. And Paul tells Lydia, after torturing her for over 12 hours, that he drugged their dad and made him watch the tape of Julia being tortured and killed, and forced him to write the suicide note before he died. So just when you think it can't get worse,
Exactly.
it does.
It does.
And all along, everyone was kind of like, I mean, they believed that the dad did kill himself, but they weren't convinced why he did. Like, they were very surprised that he did. So back to present, Claire is not doing well because, as I said, she knows that Paul is 100 steps ahead of her at all times. And the FBI pulls her in for questioning when she's in the middle of this mission to save Lydia. And the FBI tells her that they helped Paul fake his death to go into witness protection because he said he had very important information, aka he was going to give the name of the masked man, even though it's him. But Paul escapes from Nolan, the FBI agent, and goes into hiding. And that's where all of this starts, the kidnapping and whatever. And all of this is leveraged because all he needs is this flash drive. And he won't shut the fuck up about this flash drive. And Claire accidentally gave that flash drive to Adam. And she's like, is Adam in on this? Is he not in on this? I don't know. And she finally figures out that the flash drive must have his contact list on it. So basically, that can't get into the FBI's hands because it would stop his business. And also, if he has his contact list, he can disappear from the country and continue his distribution business.
Make money, yeah.
So he had it all worked out. He got the FBI to get him away scot-free, and then he was just going to move to another country with probably, you know, hidden money that he had in all of these offshore accounts, and he was just going to continue the business. So not only does Claire get the flash drive back, and she finds the contact list of 800 names of customers on this distribution list, she also finds photos of several prominent men posing with the tortured dead women, including Jackson, the politician, and Huckabee, the original detective on Julia's case, who is posing with teenage Paul and Julia's dead body.
Yep. That was shocking. That part, that one actually got me a little bit. I didn't see that one coming.
Up.
Yeah.
Because how did Huckabee look this family in the fucking face? I mean, Paul did it. So Huckabee is, you know, like Paul, but not as smart. Look this family in the face for all those years, deal with the dad pestering him day after day after day after day, trying to figure out what happened to his daughter. Like, couldn't they have maybe buried some bones or something with her DNA on it?
I know.
To get this resolved? I don't know. But he got off on it the same way that Paul got off on it, on watching this family suffer. So eventually, Claire ends up back at the house with a plan to save Lydia and kill Paul. Normally, I hate when books have a fire because I think it can be kind of a cop-out, like kind of an ending to just like...
I understand what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the author really built into the story Paul's fear of fire from the very beginning. So it definitely worked. So it's like, you can just tell how like deeply thought out this is from the very beginning. So long story short, Claire absolutely obliterates Paul, which to be fair, I would have been happy with a little more torture, but okay. And they find Julia's remains in a well on the property. And everyone lives happily ever after.
Well,
that's a stretch.
Has the case is fully resolved and they're able to move on from that part of their lives to possibly live happily ever after with their new lives.
Possibly.
Allegedly.
There's no way anyone's living happily ever after this.
No.
But the sisters have a relationship again.
Mm-hmm.
Claire gets to meet her niece. They are able to be open with their mother and have a better relationship with their mother. So basically, the only good thing that comes out of it is that this family is reunited, even though they're pissed that they lost all that time away from each other.
Yeah.
So really, there's no happiness. I was just trying. Anyway, also on this second read, I noticed that the cover is a clue. It has the water and the locket falling through the water.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what did you think of the ending specifically with Claire and Paul? Because this is a heightened, intense, disassociative, graphic scene of violence.
I think one of my favorite things about it was there was that moment that the author made you think that she was going to give in and she was going to almost give Paul and be okay with what was happening. And then she just quickly flips that switch because she's baiting him, which is nice because it's kind of a taste of his own medicine. And then she just, takes him out.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because Lydia is like scared. I mean, Lydia has gone through the most horrible past 2 days. And she's looking at Claire and she's like, Claire, do not kill him. You will not be able to come back from this. Like, this will haunt you forever. And Claire just has like blank eyes and she's like, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for worrying about me. I've got this. And then, like you said, there's that moment where Lydia's like, she thought that Claire was gonna say I love you and kiss him before he died. But instead, she says, I know you put her in the well, you asshole.
I know.
And then rips his hands away and he bleeds out. And he deserved it.
He did. But I agree. He deserved a more harsher death than he had. But realistically, how would they do that? They burned the house down and everything. What were they going to do? Take him somewhere to torture him? That's not their MO. Does he deserve it? Yes, of course. But I think that the way that it ended was correct.
Yes, I agree. They couldn't become him just to punish him.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wish that, like he struggled for a little bit longer. Maybe it took him longer to bleed out. But anyway, so they constantly say red pill, blue pill. Every time there's a hesitation to not open files, not watch a video. And it's crazy because when I was thinking about this, it kind of refers back to our episode on The Measure.
Yeah.
Not the same, but
still that same concept of, do you open Pandora's box or do you let it sit? So
like, what would you do in this situation? Would you, okay, 2-part question. If you were Claire and Lydia and you didn't know what happened to your sister, would you want to know if it was this?
I think so, just because I don't like not having closure. And like, even though it's obviously horrendous and it would give me trauma, I think knowing what happened, or at least knowing that is officially gone, it sucks, but I think knowing me, I would want to. I don't like not knowing the outcome of things.
And other part, if you had been married to your husband and you thought of him as this amazing man who loved you with his whole heart, would you want to know the truth after he died?
I think so too. But here's like the thing that's like crazy about it is that it's so common, these men that like live double lives and just get away with it so well. Like you always hear these stories about men that have like another family, or they're like living this whole other life, and it's insane. And Paul put up this great persona that didn't make Claire think twice. Like she says throughout the book multiple times, like he trusted me and like I fully trusted him. Like there was no secrets between us. Like I knew everything about him. He knew everything about me. She was able to guess all his passwords and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there should have been like the little bit of a red flag, because he was willing to give her everything, almost knowing that she wasn't smart enough to read between the lines and like dig deeper into him.
And she says that at one point. She's like, he was hiding this in plain sight. Like, I had all of his passwords. I could have looked at this at any time.
Yeah.
But he trusted that I wouldn't.
And so that would make me feel like a fucking idiot. And I'm sure that that was, which is the whole point. So, but I don't know. I feel like I'm a masochist myself, because I'm like, do I want all this like stupid shit that's gonna just make me angry and I'll dwell on it? And I was like, yeah, because I just don't like not knowing.
Yeah.
I don't like being left out. Like, it's like FOMO, even though it's bad.
FOMO, but for horrible, horrible things. Yeah. I'm like 50-50 on the marriage thing. I mean, obviously in this situation, you have to know, because then it leads to the knowledge about Julia, and I would want to know what happened to my sister. But if it was like completely separate, I don't think I want to know. Because
then it does taint the good memories that you have with someone and like the loving moments. And then of course it would open up a whole can of worms, because then it's like, oh, did what we have, was it real? Or was I the story and not, or I was like the fairy tale and not the real thing? And so
and you can't get back that time.
No, you can't.
How pissed would you be to realize that you wasted all that time with this, even though you were happy at the time, which I guess is how, you have to rationalize it. And she was obviously taken care of and she got everything that she wanted and all this stuff. But it's like, now does she feel guilty about that? It's just, there's so many layers.
Yeah. And then it sucks for her too, because he realistically like ruined her life. He was involved in her first sister's murder, made her become estranged with her other sister, killed her father. Like, this motherfucker was just like, pow, pow, pow. Like, he just took everything away from her, but made her feel safe and secure. And that's just insane. Like, that's an insane story to come up with. And Karin Slaughter's mind is fucked. And I loved it. Like, this is the kind of story that I don't even know how she came up with this. Yeah. Like, this is like the most brilliant story I've ever read. Like, it's so fucked up, but it was so brilliant.
And it's so involved, and there's so many different threads, and every single one of them is tied up. How did she do that?
I know. That's what I'm saying. And it was a very voluminous book. But I didn't even feel like it was that long, because there was constantly something going on, and you needed to know what was going to happen next. It was one of those books that was definitely impossible to put down. And I think I remember I looked at your review when you did it, and I think that's what you said. Finish this in 2 days, because I literally couldn't put it down. Like, I had to know what was going to happen next.
And that's why I was like, oh, it can't be that long of a book. And then when I saw, I was like, I think it's like, well, I had the mass market, so it's 180 pages.
Yeah. Like, I read mine on my Kindle, but still, like, it
doesn't feel like it.
No.
It really doesn't. All right. So what did you think about Helen's decision to not tell the rest of the family that she knew what happened to Julia?
I think I get it. Especially, I think there's some things that parents do to protect their children. And while it's done with good intentions, it doesn't mean it was the right thing to do, because that is such an important thing. And seeing your other children suffer, not knowing, and when you know, I think it's hard to know whether that was truly right or wrong. But I understand why she did it. So it's because they already lost their dad, they lost their sister. And, even though the mom had the answer of what happened to the sister, it was kind of, it's a lot. It's a lot to like tell your other kids, like your sister was viciously tortured and murdered. So
I'm so torn on it, because ultimately with her keeping that secret, it did alienate her from her daughters, and she missed out on having that good relationship with them. And I can't imagine how you keep a secret like that. Like how she had to deal with that on her own. She had no one to help her like carry that burden.
Mm-hmm.
And, she, like you said, she is doing it for a good reason. And she does justify it. And I totally understand because she was trying to protect her family. I think she should have at least told them that Julia was dead. She didn't have to say
Yeah.
how or whatever.
Yeah.
Because in the back of their minds, they had this slight hope that she had just run away and was still alive, which obviously anyone who reads true crime knows it isn't true. But can you blame them for holding on to that hope?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, just to take that away feels like it would have been the right decision.
Yeah.
But I get it. Either way. All right, so next I want to read a quote from one of the earlier letters from the dad to Julia so we can discuss a little bit. Your mother and I had always been secretly pleased that you were so headstrong and passionate about your causes. Once you were gone, we understood that these were the qualities that painted young men as smart and ambitious, and young women as trouble. It's no secret we talk about the patriarchy and the imbalance of power on this podcast a lot, but this quote just rings so true about this double standard for women and men's personalities. I mean, in the context of the story, Paul was passionate and headstrong, and it led to his immeasurable success, not just with his disgusting criminal enterprise, but also his immense wealth, his ability to charm political leaders, government officials, women when he chose to, etc. And in Julia's case, it made her desirable for these disgusting men.
Mm-hmm.
And it also stopped the police from looking into it, which we know they didn't look into it because of other reasons, but stopped people from taking it seriously because they thought, oh, she's just run off to join a hippie commune.
Yeah.
All right, so who was your favorite character?
I liked Lydia a lot. I liked her character progression, and it was what was interesting about her character arc in this novel is that you got her. The book starts with where she is now, and then it backtracks to her past, and and then it continues on to all the things that she did that fucked up her life, with her addiction and stealing and everything, and then how she refound herself, and that when she got pregnant with Dee, that was kind of like the thing that really made her want to be better. And I love a story like that where the mom actually tries to be better for their child, and she was successful in doing that. And then she meets this guy who's sweet baby angel Rick. Like, I loved him so much. Oh, and I love a harsh teddy bear. You know what I mean? Like, he had a hard life, but he's such you just want to like squeeze him. So it was nice that she lost so much of she lost her entire family, and then she gained something new. Mm-hmm. And just to still see her exceed after all the shit that she went through was really nice. And just the way that she was written, she was so fucking funny. And, that was even like during like the torture scenes, like she was so headstrong until she just couldn't be anymore. And like she had such resilience, and that's, to have resilience in the situation that she was in, like, come on, like that was amazing.
Yeah. Better woman than me.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't be doing that. I love Rick so much. I mean, the way that he steps up and is such a great father to Dee.
Yes.
And they just seem to have this like really good, solid relationship. They keep each other on the right path. And Lydia is so protective over Rick and Dee because she knows how fucked up her family is.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is mine. This is my secret. They never need to know about my daughter and about my life. And then obviously that changes, but she's just like a protective mama bear.
Yep.
You already answered my next question about who had the most character growth. I also want to say the mom too.
Yes.
She went from being this frigid, distant mother to helping Claire, no questions asked, even though she knew Claire was up to something dangerous. Even though, I don't fully agree with the way she handled Julia's death, she did it to protect the rest of her family.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of try to make her out to be this villain, but then you see the reason for it and why she is the way she is. And it's not like she's a main character in this, but you do get enough to realize, like,
well, that's what was actually very interesting to me, is because you see her in the beginning of the novel and you don't like her. Like, you're like, oh my God, this is like a stuck-up woman, blah, blah, blah. And then when she comes to Claire's aid and is there for her and is compassionate and does whatever she needs for her, it's like the flip of a coin. You're like, who is this woman? Like, this is not the same woman that I met in the beginning of the book, and in the parts that Lydia talked about when she basically, just dropped Lydia from her life. So when you get this view of her where she just basically says to Claire, she's like, what do you need? I will do it. No questions asked. You don't have to tell me anything. Like, that's...
But you believe it because Claire is also shocked by it. And she says, this is my mom before Julia went missing.
Yeah.
Like, so that's why you believe it, because you're like, this is who she was.
Yeah.
And she was broken by losing her daughter, which is totally understandable. So I did like that they had that in there. Also, I want to say that a lot of the characters in this are very funny, and they do have a lot of witty quips and stuff like that. Even Agent Nolan, when he's talking about how Paul gave him the slip and all this stuff, just the way they talk is very funny. And I think it's good because it really, balances out just how rough this book is.
And I literally called it from his introduction. I was like, he's going to end up with Claire. And he does.
So gross.
I was like, I'm like, I just have a feeling. And then when at the very end, when she tells Lydia, she's like, I went on a date, or I'm going on a date with Nolan. It's like, okay.
She's like, at least I know he's shitty from the beginning.
I know.
Like, oh my God. Which, good point.
Yeah, exactly.
So we talked about this a little bit, but do the lies Paul told Claire change her past? Basically, the memory of her happy marriage.
In this situation, it does taint it, because this is such a specific scenario in that he was the puppet master in her life from the very beginning, and it's not like they were married and then he had a double life doing something else, whereas like, no, like, he came into her life specifically to fuck with her. So it does taint the happy marriage, because now she has to relive her past, knowing that she, loved someone who was terrible, was intimate with someone that was terrible, told all her secrets and feelings to someone that was terrible. So it's kind of like she gave up pieces of herself that she never would have in the first place.
And she gave up her relationship with her sister.
Yes.
And totally, which, obviously believe women, but understandable because of who Lydia was at that time.
Yeah.
And she felt like she couldn't trust her at all. But she lost her sister and chose Paul over him.
Yeah.
I don't know if Claire really loved Paul. I think she loved Paul. I don't know if she was in love with Paul. I think he was her security blanket.
Yes, I agree with that.
And made her feel safe and cared for. But she was still sleeping with his business partner, so she wasn't entirely devoted.
My opinion on her character is that I don't think she's wants to fall in love. I feel like she shuts off that part of her and just kind of goes with emotions and just does what she feels like.
And the father, in his letters, he alludes to that too. And he says, Claire's way too good for Paul. This is when they first started dating. Claire's way too good for Paul. She's definitely just with him because he adores her. He spells it all out. So I totally agree. Do you think that Paul loved Claire?
In some fucked up way, yes. Because I think that that's just who he was. But I think that he definitely... I mean, I think he even alludes to it that he wanted Lydia. Lydia was like his first choice, but then he couldn't get to Lydia. So then he goes for Claire. And I think that Claire has this kind of young aura about her that interested him. And then he got off on the fact that like he knew and did so much that she had nothing about. But the way that it was written, I did feel like he did love her, but he was also just a fucking terrible human being. So it could have also just been
like
an act.
He loved her as much as a sociopath can love another person.
Yes, there you go. That's a great way to put it.
Why do you think that Paul specifically targeted Julia's family? I don't remember them explicitly saying that Julia was the first torture murder that he participated in, but that's kind of the vibe I got. Like that he had this specific tie to Julia, and that's why he went after her sisters.
Because if I remember in the book, he was pissed because his dad didn't save her for him, you know? So, and I think that, I don't know if maybe Paul was one that had targeted Julia specifically, and then the dad just kind of had maybe a moment, it was an opportune moment, and so he did what he did, and so you kind of got the vibe that because Paul couldn't have what he wanted with Julia, he was able to go after the family.
Yeah, maybe. I agree with that. I agree with that.
Maybe.
And like you said, he was going for Lydia first, probably because she was a little older. But then Claire, obviously Lydia was going through her own things, and Claire was more controllable in his opinion.
Oh, yeah.
So I read online that one of the criticisms of this book, first of all, how dare they? But a criticism is that once there's the big reveal about Paul, his actions become cliche or over the top. Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree. Because I don't think it was written in a cliche way. Because I can get the vibe of, I can understand what the criticism would be, but I don't get that from this. Especially like the fucking torture scenes with Lydia. Like, that's not cliche. That's hard fucking core. So, and it's so interesting the way that he gaslights Claire and is the whole entire time and just is like, no, I had no part of it. I swear. And he can flip the switch so easy of being, you know, terrible human being to Lydia and then trying to be the sweet doting husband, confessing his sins and that he wasn't the one doing all the terrible stuff and feeding into Claire's, you know, illusion of who he is. So
yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think that his actions change because we're now seeing the other side of him. He's always been that way. He's been torturing and murdering women since he was a teenager.
And it almost makes you like have to go back and like think of who he was as a human, and then you have to kind of rectify the situation and who he is now, like knowing who he is now. So that's not cliche to me because I'm like, holy shit.
And you see that he was always his true self with Lydia because of how he acted all those years ago. And he's still playing off his fake self with Claire and taking care of her after he punches her in the face, but also still trying to manipulate her, whether he actually intended to run away with her or not. He's still trying to keep her on side.
And that was another thing that made me think that he really did love her, because he would try to hurt her as minimally as possible with like the physical stuff and everything. Like he didn't really want to hurt her. So,
but then it's like, was he just continuing his manipulation so that he could get his stupid flash drive?
Yeah,
who knows?
I know this. Listen, we'll never know.
Okay, last but not least, what did you think of all the characters involved in this, as far as the cops, the FBI, the politicians, etc.?
There were so many moving pieces that sometimes it could feel like too much, but all the characters had a point, and then their reason for being there was explained. And I appreciate that. It wasn't like just throw a random cop in, especially from the beginning when Claire brings the computer drive to the police station and she shows the cop. She's like, I don't know if I should be showing you this, like, blah, blah, blah. And he's this guy who was in on it does this
Mhm.
straight face, and he was like, oh, this is just snuff porn. This isn't real.
Mhm.
And he plays it off so well and convincing that you believe that, like, oh, okay, so Paul really is, like, he was just into, like, torture porn and everything. And then when you come to find out, like, no, he was one of the people that were involved, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, so all these characters had a reason, and then when they come to the reason why they're there,
Mhm.
it was good.
I agree. I did think some parts were a little convoluted and you had to really pay attention to
Yeah.
keep track because they're all shady, even the ones who aren't involved in this,
Yeah, and
like
like there was
the
that
Nolan
whole
and
thing,
Adam.
and there was that whole thing with the mom's, like, her husband being a politician against Paul's
Oh,
uncle. You
yeah.
know what I mean? So then
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
why Lydia was like, you have to send this to her because she'll blast him, and her husband is the good guy and everything. So, like, there were so many moving parts, and they were just,
Mhm.
it was interesting to see how she tied it all together.
Yeah. And I didn't see them all as red herrings per se because
No.
they did all have something
Mm-hmm.
shady. And it shows Claire's inability to trust after she got bamboozled by Paul. It also speaks to how really gripping this book is that you're able to keep up with all these different
Mm-hmm.
characters because I feel like even just explaining it, I left out so much,
I know.
but it's like it was still easy to follow.
Yeah.
And also, on a grander scale, this shit does happen. Look at Jeffrey Epstein and his tangled web of enablers.
I kept sitting with that. Not like him per se, but as I'm reading it and I'm thinking about the horribleness of what these men were doing to these girls, and knowing that this does happen. It's
Hmm.
happening right now as we speak. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's
And how
disgusting
many
that this is
people.
the world that we live in, that these
Hmm.
stories that these authors write and come up with, they're things that actually happen.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
And how many people have to be involved and
yes.
how many of these disgusting, untrustworthy people have to trust each other
Mm-hmm.
to make all of this happen?
Yeah, I
And
know.
it's just, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and going higher and higher and higher up
Mm-hmm.
the food chain. And it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not get into that too far. I'm freaking out. Oh, okay. Our rating scale.
Oh God.
Don't worry. I could have gone in a bad direction, but I'm going to keep it simple. And we're going to rate it out of cars Claire and Paul own that I cannot afford.
There were so many.
There's so many.
Like everything. He had, like, everything was just so expensive. I'm like, damn,
I
must be
couldn't even
nice.
afford like their countertops in their
No,
kitchen.
no. Uh, I gave it 5 cars that I don't even know what they are, to be honest. They're like naming these cars. I'm like, I don't know. Sounds pricey. Sounds expensive. But no, I gave this book all the stars, all the cars, all everything, because it was just so good, and it was so dark and so fucked up. And I said to you, I'm like, I don't know what this says about me reading 2 super fucking dark books back to back, giving them both 5 stars and singing their praises when the material is not lighthearted, nor should ever be talked about, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
But what I liked about this book too is, and even My Dark Vanessa, is like there are situations that actually do happen, and the way that Karin Slaughter approached the situation, the way that she wrote, the way that, like I said before, like it was so brilliant
Mm-hmm.
to create this story and execute it the way that she did. Like, I can see why she's your favorite author, because she's so good at telling a story and keeping you enraptured and not leaving any breadcrumbs and not tying up everything, because we find that a lot in thriller books.
Mm-hmm.
Not all loose ends aren't tied up, and then some things are left, and then when you get to the ending and you're like, oh, okay, like that was kind of like anticlimactic. Like, this one kept you on your toes the entire time. And even with Paul's reveal, it was a 50-50 shot that it was him to begin with, but the way
Mm-hmm.
that she approached that situation and laid that all out and then seeing how he handled his situation. Like, it was just really well done.
And it's also so different from some of these popular thrillers in
Yeah.
that there's no like twist right at the end to
No.
shock you. This is like twist after twist after twist throughout the whole book, and it's really just weaved throughout the whole story.
Mm-hmm. They're not like far-fetched twists. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
twists that make sense to the story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, no surprise here. I am giving it 5 cars I cannot afford. I'm obsessed with this book. Yes, it's very dark, but it's also extremely thought out, extremely detailed, and you can just tell that this is good, well-researched writing. It's not just graphic to shock you. And especially after hearing Karin Slaughter's answer to why her books are so violent, I
Mm-hmm.
think that further solidifies the need for all this. I mean, this is definitely not a lighthearted beach read thriller. This is going to seep into your brain. And on one hand, I'm like, wow, like you said, what does it say about me that I love this book so much?
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of people who read it and loved it on Goodreads, the amount of people we know who have read it and loved
Yeah.
it, it really speaks to the balance that she's able
Mm-hmm.
to put in these stories, because this is a book about torture porn
Mm-hmm.
and it's brilliantly written.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's impressive. So now I need to read something very refreshing, a nice palate cleanser, before our next read for this podcast, which I know will not be a palate cleanser,
No, it won't.
but in a different way than this one.
Yes, but still, fuck men is all I'll say. Fuck the patriarchy, because that seems to be a running fucking theme on this podcast, which is fine.
Yeah, we're staying on brand, and
Yeah,
I
we
love
are.
our consistency.
I know, me too.
Love that for us. All right, so that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads. Thanks for checking us out, and remember,
If you need us, we're fully booked.
bye!